The Memphis Grizzlies wrapped up day 3 of training camp in Nashville, and I kept hearing one name, Jake LaRavia. Is it time? Is it finally time to fully buy into the hype of Jake LaRavia? Let's talk about it coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee. Still in Nashville, Tennessee, covering your Grizzlies as training camp just wrapped up all 3 days in Nashville, Tennessee at Ensworth High School. Very productive time for the Memphis Grizzlies. Everyone that I've talked to, all the players that we got to talk to, a lot of the same messages were echoed, and we'll get through some of that in today's show. But remember that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies on today. Make sure you continue to watch Locked On Grizzlies each and everywhere you get your podcasts. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen, wherever you watch. Locked On Grizzlies is there. Make sure you continue to like, rate, review, comment, subscribe, all those good things. And let us know, how you feel about Locked On Grizzlies so we can continue to improve the show for you. And speaking of improving for somebody, Jake LaRavia. Yeah, that Jake LaRavia. Former first-round pick, entering his 3rd season in the NBA. It's turning heads so far in preseason training camp. And before we dive deep into it, I know, look, some of you are saying, Michael, we've heard this before. Because you have in certain ways. But it's different this time. I'm not saying the results will be different or anything behind that. I'll get to that a little bit later. We'll talk about that in a second. But what's different is the way that people are talking about Jake LaRavia. What did we hear the first couple years? It was all about the shooting, right? Shooting. Oh, he can shoot the basketball. He can space the floor. This year, I'm hearing about defense more than anything else. And I always say, when I'm talking to y'all here on Locked On Grizzlies, every now and then, I'll give you my informed opinion on what I think. But a lot of times, I like to speak through the lens of how I believe Taylor Jenkins is viewing things based on, scheme, based on the things that he enforces, based on the things that are important to him. And in this case, when we talk about Jake LaRavia, when we talk about John Conchar, we talk about Jalen Wells, and these guys who have this opportunity, right? This opportunity because Vince Williams is hurt. Gigi Jackson is hurt. There are minutes to be had on the wing. And right now, it's only been 3 days, things are subject to move. I'm led to believe that Jake LaRavia is in the lead. The Grizzlies' first preseason game was today. You say, oh, yeah, Jake LaRavia will get the call before Jalen Wells. Jake LaRavia will get the call before John Conchar. Taylor Jenkins said that Jake LaRavia has been probably one of the biggest standouts in preseason camp so far. Those are Taylor Jenkins' words, not mine. One of the best standouts. When I talked to Marcus Smart in Media Day, some of you have heard this and we've talked about it. I said, Marcus, you can't play 48 minutes. Well, I said, you're not going to play 48 minutes. And someone is going to have to come in the game when Marcus Smart goes out of the game because Vince Williams can't do it right now. Someone's going to have to come in the game and be that guy and say, hey, I can go guard that point guard who's tough to stop, or I can guard that 2, or I can guard that big wing that Marcus Smart was guarding when he goes out of the game. And I said, who can be that perimeter defender when you're not in the game? Marcus Smart didn't hesitate. He said Jake LaRavia. And then yesterday I was talking to Luke Kennard. And Luke Kennard's talking about, Jake LaRavia, and what he brings up first is the defense. Sensing a theme here. Jake LaRavia's defense is making waves in Grizzlies camp. And if Jake LaRavia is improving defensively, he's going to play. He is going to play. We talk a lot about the offense, him being a talented shooter, him being a talented scorer, because he's, shown the ability. As Brandon Clark, who was, describing his game on yesterday, talked about his ability to put the ball on the floor, make plays and things like that. Jake LaRavia has shown all of that in spurts. When you go back to the Lakers game towards the end of last season, a couple other performances he had in March, he's shown that ability. But be honest with yourself. You look at the Grizzlies bench, Luke Kennard's probably going to average double figures. If not, he'll be close to it. Brandon Clark has averaged double figures every year of his career to this point. He's probably a good bet to be somewhere around double figures. So you got a decent amount of scoring just between those two. And if Scottie Pippen Jr. is playing, I'm led to believe that Scottie Pippen Jr. can hoop, point blank, period. They're going to need someone who can come in and defend, who can come in and knock down shots, which I think Jake LaRavia can do. He'll continue to improve at and whatnot. But it's the defense. It's all about the defense, and he is drawing the praise of multiple teammates. We heard Brandon Clark talk about it. We heard Luke Kennard talk about it. We heard Marcus Smart talk about it. Jake LaRavia is 6'7", 235. That's what he's listed at, right? Here's the biggest key in all of that. Taylor Jenkins is talking about how the Grizzlies are constructed things right now. And when we were talking about that backup wing position, Taylor Jenkins described this player as someone who could be a 3-4. Not a guy that's going to play the 2 and the 3, because you got Luke Kennard, you got Desmond Bane, you got Marcus Smart, you got all these guys, Scottie Pippen Jr., John Morant can possibly slide down to the 2-inch stretches or whatever the case may be. Taylor Jenkins described it as a guy who can play the 3 and the 4. That's Jake LaRavia. He mentioned Jake LaRavia by name. He mentioned John Conchar by name too, and as well as I think Santi Aldama. But especially while Jaren Jackson Jr. is out, you're going to see Santi. You're probably going to see Jake be that guy who gets those minutes behind him as the backup 4. And then when Jaren gets back, you slide him to the 3. There is some position versatility in terms of what Jake LaRavia can bring to the table. He has the versatility to play the 3, to play the 4. And defensively, it's all about the strength part of the game, right? 6'7", 235. He's a big dude. Jake LaRavia ain't just getting back down in the paint by those big wings, because the Western Conference has a bunch of big wings. Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, like those are bigger wings. Anthony Edwards, 6'5", like 230 plus. Like these are big dudes that will bulldoze you. And you need those stronger wing defenders who have the length, not only the length, but can match physicality with those type of guys. And not saying Jake LaRavia is capable of doing it with those guys in particular, but if you listen to what we're hearing through camp right now so far, the key's been his defense. I've said it time and time again. When we were talking about Santi Aldama a couple years ago when Jaren Jackson Jr. was starting the year hurt, it was all about defense. It wasn't about if he can make 6 3-pointers or if he can do all these flashy things. Taylor Jenkins wants defenders. That's why some people complain about, why this guy isn't playing, why that guy isn't playing. I say, hey, is he a good defender? Because that's the first thing that Taylor Jenkins is going to look at. This team is built on defense. But with all that being said, it just seems so far, everyone's been complimentary of Jake LaRavia. And as Taylor Jenkins said, he's been one of the standouts of camp. Really interested to see how that goes going forward, because this battle's not over. John Conchar, if he shoots the ball well from 3-point range in the preseason, it's probably going to be in the rotation. He can play defense. He can get those rebounds and things like that. That's probably another very important piece to this thing. The rebounding, right? Jake LaRavia has proven that he can rebound, in stretches, but John Conchar has done it in NBA games. Then there's this other factor about this pressure defense. We talked about it a little bit in yesterday's episode, the idea that the Grizzlies want to be a more pressure-based defense. Summer League is Summer League. I'm not going to take too much from it. I'm not going to overdo this, but I will say If you say in summary, if we saw Jake LaRavia applying pressure, or if we didn't see him applying pressure, we definitely saw him applying pressure. He caused a lot of steals. Him and Scottie Pippen Jr. both were just, they were the Grizzly bank robbers the way they were stealing over there in Las Vegas. So, point blank period. It's simple. Jake LaRavia off to a good defensive start in camp. And he's knocking down some shots as well, according to Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard said he's knocking down some shots. And, he's doing well offensively too. So if that's the case, I'm led to believe that right now Jake LaRavia is the guy in front when we talk about the backup spot. Do you believe in Jake LaRavia? Are you you're like, hey, Damichael, I got to see a little bit more to really buy into this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about the potential Jake LaRavia breakout. He's getting a lot of hype from the players, and we'll see, what it means for the Grizzlies, not only in the preseason, but in the regular season as well, because they're going to need that depth in a crucial season coming up here for the Memphis Grizzlies. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about the impact of injuries, and because it's taking a toll on the Grizzlies right now in terms of preparation. But before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Look, Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets out there. So you need to go take advantage of Gametime Picks right now. And there's so many great deals and so many great features that you can go take advantage of at Gametime. You can use the app features to customize your spot and the supplemental as inspiration. You can use app features like the super deal. You get seat views before you buy. You get the lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. All of this is through Gametime. You can't find better out there. Through the seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You'll know exactly where you're sitting and how that the view is from that seat. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So yeah, it's going to get the lowest price guaranteed for you. And then you get that good ticket coverage, as I just mentioned earlier. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. You might be saying, well, Mike, how do I go take advantage of this? It's simple. Go download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code, capital LOCKED, capital ON, and then a capital N, a capital B, and capital A for $20 off of your next purchase. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about the injuries a little bit and how it's changing some things. The Grizzlies are preparing differently now because of those injuries. So let's talk about that here coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. And we know how big a deal the injuries were last season, right? We talked about that time and time again. Injuries affecting the Grizzlies. Injuries impacted the Grizzlies. They struggled because of injuries, everything in between. I learned something in these first 3 days of training camp talking to these guys. And, Zach Kleiman said at Media Day, like, the past is the past. Let's put all the injury stuff behind us and pretty much forget about it. I completely understand what he was saying. But for the players, at least the ones that I've talked to, I don't know if they've forgotten about the injuries. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it like it's just stuck in the back of their head and it's going to impact the way they're playing or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. They haven't forgot from the standpoint of maybe a better way or a different way to put it is they've learned from it and they have some new things that they want to apply because of that. I'll give you 3 players in particular who've dealt with injuries a lot recently and that I've heard vocally expressed to me or expressed in larger media settings that they plan on doing things a little bit differently in terms of making sure that they stay healthy this season. The most obvious one is Ja Morant. You've heard me talk about this before if you were following, last year before he played the 9 games and whatnot, where Ja talked about the idea of, not really trying to dunk on guys as much anymore and things like that. But that mentality is carrying over into this season. Ja Morant's not trying to just viciously go to the rim and jump over dudes anymore. He's going to go to the rim. He's going to go get in the paint. And instead of jumping over 2 feet, jumping over guys like we saw in that Lakers series a lot, he's going to pull up for the mid-range jumper. He's going to pull up for the floater. Little things like that to better, give himself better longevity over the course of the season. That is the Ja Morant plan. So if, you're waiting on Ja Morant to dunk on everyone this year on his revenge tour, you might get a couple. Like, Ja got that dog. He's one of those type of dudes that's going to go to the rim every now and then. He's going to try to dunk on some dudes. But at the same time, I wouldn't expect it to be at the same volume as we've seen, in past seasons. Now, Brandon Clark. Because it's kind of the same with him. Brandon Clark coming off the Achilles injury. For one, no restrictions whatsoever for Brandon Clark at this point. It's just in case anyone was wondering. He has no restrictions whatsoever, fully healthy. He feels really good about where he is from an athleticism standpoint. And I think his adjustments are kind of similar to the ones that Ja Morant said. And he basically said, too, you're still going to see him throwing down the dunks because at the end of the day, Brandon Clark rolls hard to the rim. He's very good at rolling to the basket. And when he rolls to the basket, Ja Morant's going to just throw the ball in the air. And in this case, Scottie Pippen Jr., when he plays, Marcus Smart loves throwing lobs. Those dudes are going to make him go get it. And he's going to go get it. He's going to throw down some dunks that way. But he's making some changes to his game too. And he specifically told me, it's not just more floaters because we know Brandon Clark has one of the better floaters in the NBA among bigs, over the last 3 years. That is statistically proven. But even beyond that, Brandon Clark wants to get back to shooting more three-pointers and knocking them down. I know some of you say, no, we don't need that. We don't need that. But look, I said he wants to get back to shooting more three-pointers and knocking them down. Emphasis on the and knocking them down. Brandon Clark pointed out to us on yesterday, I was a really good three-point shooter my first season. His words, not mine. He says he knows he can get back to that. He didn't lose it in his mind. He knows he can get back to that. And if Brandon Clark shoots efficiently from three-point range, that unlocks so many things for the Grizzlies that we barely even talk about because we don't even think that it's a potential option. The number one thing for me is with Jaren Jackson Jr., he's become so indispensable because of the fact that he, in my opinion, is the only big on the Grizzlies roster who can play with any of the other bigs in a lineup that would have a decent net rating. You can put Jaren Jackson Jr. in the game alongside of Zach Edey. No one would flinch. You can put him in the game alongside of Brandon Clark. You wouldn't flinch. There's proof in that. There's some real good proof in that pudding. You put him on the floor alongside of, Santi Aldama. No one's going to flinch too hard at that. You put him on the floor alongside of Jay Huff. No one's going to flinch too hard at that. But with the other guys, there's limits to who those guys can play with. Brandon Clark, if he's knocking down three-pointers officially, and again, he said he wants to get to this game where he's still going to be, I think, a pretty much a dominant paint presence. But he wants to shoot a little bit more and, his body, kind of just better take care of his body to prevent those type of injuries, the Achilles injuries and things like that. And if he's efficiently shooting from three-point range, guess what? You can play Brandon Clark at the floor a little bit more because he has the mobility and the defensive versatility to hang in those matchups. That's never been a problem. The problem is in the past when the Grizzlies used to play him alongside of Steven Adams, Taylor Jenkins said, this ain't going to work. And then we never saw it again. Never saw it again. So right now, it doesn't sound like, and Taylor Jenkins was asked about this, it doesn't sound like we're going to see Brandon Clark and Zach Edey. But if Brandon Clark shows that offensive versatility with extended range that he plans on showcasing, because he said, I've done this before. Let's not act like I wasn't, in his words, a 40% three-point shooter as a rookie. I can do this. And if he can do that, you can put him on the floor with Zach Edey because he can space the floor in that match, in that lineup. Because defensively, he's going to be able to, hold his own in switches and things like that. It gives you more optionality, whereas right now, if you want to really get nitpicky with this team, Jaren Jackson Jr. is the only big that I trust in those situations. We got one more player to discuss in this conversation as well. But before I get to that, I want to talk to you about the fact that I want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, make sure you go enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast, because there is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides you daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The last player we got to talk about is Marcus Smart. And I'll be quick with this one because this one was pretty self-explanatory. And last season, before Marcus Smart, when he joined the Grizzlies, we brought in a reporter from Boston on the show, right? And we talked about what Marcus Smart could bring, the good, the positive, the negatives, all these things. And one thing that stood out to me was the fact that Marcus Smart has kind of created this reputation where sometimes, if it's possible, he is the guy that proves that sometimes you can go too hard and make yourself, put yourself in situations where injuries are bound to happen. And then lo and behold, it was only a couple weeks later, boom, Marcus Smart out for the rest of the preseason, abdominal injury. Remember that? Remember he had that abdominal injury that prevented him from playing much of last preseason? And then in the regular season, hand injuries. Stuff like that. And we saw him diving on the floor. I think one time he had the splint, from diving on the floor in that Pelicans game I think that was like late December when that was. But the point that I'm making is Marcus Smart goes hard, and we all know that. Marcus Smart said something. He was talking about staying healthy, and he said that I got to make it to June if that's our goal. And referring to, being in the NBA Finals. And he paraphrasing, he basically said that he's got a better idea that, look, he can't go all out and do the most Marcus Smart things in these practices at all times if he's going to be that player. Now, remember last year, I asked Taylor Jenkins, I'll never forget, I asked Taylor Jenkins, I said, do you sometimes want to catch yourself like telling Marcus Smart, hey, turn it down a little bit. It's just practice. We need you for the games. And Taylor Jenkins said, no, he wants Marcus to be full-on Marcus Smart. Now, this year, Taylor Jenkins didn't switch his approach there, but Marcus Smart himself said he's going to be smarter in practices, and he's going to be more mindful of those situations. That was real important to me, and that really stood out to me, that Marcus Smart is willing to make that change. We'll see what it means for his health on this Grizzlies team going forward. And speaking of this Grizzlies team going forward, they're really focused. We'll talk about that focus level here in a minute. Before we talk about that focus level, I want to bring your attention to America's #1 sports book, and that's FanDuel. And NFL fans in particular, I'm talking to you. Baseball fans, we'll get to you a little bit later. But hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel right now. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, or you want to check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, or whatever it may be, so much more is on the same page where you can place your bets. And if you're new to FanDuel, you can get started. Make sure you hear this. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first ever $5 bet. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bets. Baseball fans, make sure you go check out those FanDuel odds right now, because they've been updated, because the NLDS has been set. Oh, my Braves aren't there. I've accepted reality for what it is. Shout out to my Braves for still making the playoffs despite losing, a lot of star talent this season. But, we got the NL East teams in there. We got the NL West teams in there as well. Dodgers, Padres, Mets, Phillies. We'll see what happens. But FanDuel has updated the odds. So make sure you go check out those odds over there on FanDuel, over at America's number one sports book over on FanDuel. Make sure you take advantage of all the opportunities that FanDuel has to offer for you. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, the Grizzlies have a different approach, not just with the injuries, but in general. Let's talk about that here next on Locked On Grizzlies. So this new approach with the Grizzlies, right? I wouldn't call it new, but we'll get into it a little bit because you've heard it at this point. If you've been following, what I've been saying, if you've been following any other little media interviews and things like that, or some of my work at the Commercial Appeal, you've heard all this talk about the idea that the Grizzlies are a little bit more, I guess, dare I say, focused or just intense. I've heard Luke Kennard say it. I heard John Morant say it. Taylor Jenkins said it in a way. And I can't help but talk about it. So let's say the Grizzlies are as intense as they've ever been, in the Taylor Jenkins era. You may say, what does that look like, Damichael? Because, these guys coming like last year, right? Remember Jaren Jackson Jr. said, we got humbled. We got embarrassed. We coming in, with something to prove and all that. And then, last season played out the way that it did. So it's only talk at the end of the day, right? It's only talk. But the Grizzlies know that. This team isn't – the only trash talk that's going on is in the practices. It's not on camera this year. It's a very business approach. I'll give you a quote from Taylor Jenkins when talking to him on yesterday. He said, I think we've come in, we've said what we said, and now we've got to prove it night after night. Seeing the urgency from the guys that have been with me the last 5 years, I think there's a rejuvenated focus. It's one thing to hear the players say it because they've been saying it a lot. Luke Kennard said it before camp even started. To hear Taylor Jenkins say, the guys that have been here over 5 years, it's rejuvenated focus. You know who's been with Taylor Jenkins the last 5 years? Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, Brandon Clark, John Conchar, Desmond Bane. Some of the guys that have been here with him the last 5 years, they got a rejuvenated focus based on what Taylor Jenkins just said. John Morant said it's more trash talk in the practices. He ain't the first player I heard say that. A couple of players have said that to me. They're getting after each other. Marcus Smart was just joking to me the other day. Desmond Bane ain't playing no defense. Let me rephrase. He was saying Des don't play defense, but then he complimented the fact that Desmond Bane is now playing defense in camp. Then Desmond Bane said, Marcus Smart don't do nothing. But it's all fun. Because Desmond Bane's defense has been a talking point. The fact that he is competing his butt off so far in training camp and getting after it. Marcus Smart don't do nothing. Marcus Smart's Swiss Army knife. But it's trash talk. It's fun. These dudes are getting after it. They're bringing the best out of each other. And even with the injuries, the Grizzlies have the type of depth where you can put quality units out there against each other and have this type of competitiveness. I've heard too many people say it to think that this focus is not something different. The question is, how much will it matter, right? Sure, you can be more focused and you can be mad. How will it skillfully translate? That's the question going forward. I want to see that, and I think we'll start to get our answer to that in the next few days. The Grizzlies will get today off, and then they'll practice again. They'll have open practice on Sunday at FedEx Forum. So if you're available, go check out open practice. I'll be there. Say hey, say what's up to Michael if you see me at open practice. And then the first preseason game against the Dallas Mavericks on Monday. You'll hear me and Joe talk about that a little bit more in the next show. But thank you guys for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, go find Locked On NBA, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Appreciate you guys tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with us each and every day, and continue to tune in with us. Nashville was fun. The Nashville trip ended with the Grizzlies going to TSU. Some of the players went to Tennessee State University. And great showing at TSU. Shout out to Tennessee State. The band came in. They had a kind of like a pep rally type vibe when the players walked in the building. The Divine Nine showed out with the strolls and the stepping, and it was a nice scene, at Tennessee State, welcoming the Grizzlies players there, showing them that HBCU culture, them HBCU vibes. So terrific trip to Nashville. I enjoyed it. As Taylor Jenkins said, he thinks that those type of things bring the Grizzlies team closer. How much closer? Well, we're going to find out here over the next few days, because guess what? Preseason basketball is about to start. We're about to start seeing actual minutes of what's going on with the Grizzlies on the basketball floor, and you're going to start seeing some adversity, because everything is not going to be peaches and creams. So make sure you tune in with us on Locked On Grizzlies to see that process through as well. Locked On Grizzlies, remember that we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.